supply. Okay, so in supply chapter we have seen the definition of supply there. In supply chapter we have seen the definition of supply. So what comes under supply? So in order to be supply, what shall be there? First of all, goods or services. Okay, so we shall be dealing in goods or services. So it shall be falling under the definition of goods, or it shall be falling under the definition of service. Okay, so there are some exclusions to goods and services, just like money, securities, okay, immovable property, right? These are the exclusions to goods. So if we are dealing in just goods, then only, so goods, that too there shall be some activity, okay, so or supply which shall be sale or maybe transfer, maybe barter, maybe lease, okay, maybe license, rental, okay, disposal, correct? Disposal, etc. Whatever it may be relating to goods or services. It may be sale of goods or service, or it may be transfer of goods or service, or it may be barter, or it may be lease or license of services or goods, okay, or goods. Okay, if these are made, for consideration, in some exceptional cases without consideration. Okay, exceptional cases means which are there in schedule 1. Okay, if you are doing it for consideration, and during the course of business, in exceptional cases, business is also need not be there. Okay, during the course of business. Exceptional case is what? Importation of service. What is the exception to business? Section 7 subsection 1 clause B, importation of service. Okay, in the course or furtherance of business means, okay, consideration must be there. In the course or furtherance of business, it shall be there. So then it will be a supply. Okay, if it is supply, then it shall be taxable, made by taxable person. If it is a supply, then if it is made by taxable person, and if it is a taxable supply, then GST will be levied. See here, an activity is there, activity relating to goods or services, whichever the activity may be. It may be sale, it may be transfer, it may be barter, whatever it there. You are dealing in goods, and that too for consideration, and that too during the course or furtherance of business. So then it will comes under the definition of supply. Once it is supply, okay, and it is not covered as per schedule 3, which is negative list, and if it is made by taxable person, and if it is a taxable supply, then only GST will be applicable, GST will be levied. So if any of these conditions fails, there will be no GST. So you see, first point is there, goods or services is there, no? Goods or services is there. That means if you are not dealing in goods or not dealing in services, then GST will not come. Ultimately GST will not come. See, let's say if you are into lands, selling and purchase of lands. If you are into selling and purchase of lands, first of all, land will not comes under the definition of goods. Then there is no question of GST here, because it is not a good, it is not a service. It will not come. Next, whenever it is a case of any activity, see here, this is not an exhaustive list, this is an inclusive list. So whatever the activity may be, so any activity will come here. Scope is wider here. Next, it shall be made for consideration. If you are not doing it for consideration, then GST will not come. Let's say as a CA, my friend is asking me to file his income tax return. Okay, so that's why I'm filing his income tax return, but free of cost. But for free of cost, here GST will be attracted. So I'm doing a supply of service for no consideration. During the course or furtherance of business is there. That means I am into practice. So I am filing return. Okay, so consideration is 0 here. So GST will be attracted. GST will not be attracted. So even if you are doing for without consideration also, in some cases GST will be attracted. But there are limited cases only. What are those which are mentioned in Schedule 1? In those cases only GST will be attracted. Even though it is made for without. See here in that first point will be there. What is their first point? Schedule 1 first point. Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets on which input tax credit has been taken. See, this is a service. I have not taken any input tax credit. This is a service which I am giving. It is not an input service, correct? Or input good. Okay, so right, next. Next, what is that next para? Next para, what is that? Related person, distinct person. He is not related. He is a not related person. He is just my friend, right? Next, third point. Principal agent. He is not my agent. He is not my principal. Okay, next, last point. Importation of service. Nothing is there. So see, even though no consideration, no GST. So it is not covering under Schedule 1. That's why no GST, right? So that means consideration must be there except for Schedule 1 services or Schedule 1 activities. Consideration must be there in order to be taxed under GST, right? If there is no consideration, no GST. No consideration, no GST except for Schedule 1 cases. Okay. Next, business shall be there. Business shall be there. I am dealing in goods. I am doing an activity. I am dealing in goods. I am doing an activity. Even though I am doing an activity, there is a consideration. But all these conditions are satisfied. But it is not under business. It is not under business. I am just having the skill to file the returns. That's why I am filing the return to my friend. But I don't have practice. There is no course or furtherance of business here. There is no business here. Or else, if I am selling my laptop to somebody, I am not dealing into laptop. I am not dealing in laptop. I don't have any business. I am just selling my laptop because I don't want it now. Okay, I am planning for the new laptop, whatever. Okay, in such cases, no business activity. That's why no GST will come. So in order to levy GST, all these conditions must be satisfied. What is that? It shall be goods. It shall be a specific activity and it shall be for consideration and during the course or furtherance of business, then it will comes under the definition of supply. If all these conditions are satisfied also, if it is not falling under the definition of supply, like if it is not covered under, see, if the activity is covered under Schedule 3, all the consideration is there, goods is there, whatever, everything is there, but it is covered under Schedule 3. If all the conditions are satisfied, then also it is not a supply, right? So if it is supply, even if it is supply, if it is made by a taxable person, then only GST will be levied. If it is not made by a taxable person, GST will not be levied. Let's say I'm into a pan shop business, so where I am doing just a turnover of 6 lakhs per annum. Okay, I am sitting at the desk of the pan shop. So okay, so I will be selling only 6 lakhs per annum. Okay, so even though I am doing all these things, see, goods are I am dealing in goods or service, consideration is there during the course or furtherance of business. That means it is a supply. That means it is a supply and handling the taxable goods on which tax is there. I am handling taxable goods. I am selling taxable goods, but still I am not a taxable person. That's why GST will not be there. Okay, see, if the goods are a taxable, if the person who is handling or doing the business is a taxable person, but still sometimes GST will not be there because he is dealing in non-taxable goods. He is dealing in non-taxable goods. Let's say educational services, a degree college is there for me. I am doing business. That means I am into business. Consideration I am taking, giving services, consideration taking in the course or furtherance of business. It is a supply. See, and that too I am a taxable person because my turnover crosses 20 lakhs or 40 threshold limit is getting crossed. Other services are being provided. Okay, but education service is exempted or hospital service is exempted. So likewise, if the service is not taxable service or exempted service, so then GST will not be attracted. So in order to attract GST, if all these conditions are met, then the GST will come. Okay, right, if it is a taxable supply. So when it is a taxable supply, if it is not an exempt supply, then it is a taxable supply. Okay, that exemption we have to discuss now. That exemptions we have to discuss now. So that is the relevance of exemptions here. That is the relevance of exemption here. Right. So with respect to exemptions, we have exemptions exemptions, exemptions on goods, exemptions on services. Just for the sake of knowledge, we have to see goods. It is not in our syllabus. Just services exemption is only there. So which is the power of the government, central government? Section 6 or section 11, section 6 of IGST Act, section 11 of CGST Act is giving the power to the central government to grant exemption on a particular good, on particular services. So if the council is meeting and council is recommending to these products or these services shall be exempted because these are very much essential to the public, these are in the interest of the public, we have to give exempt these goods karke. If there is a suggestion from a GST council meeting, on the recommendations of the GST council meeting, government may consider the recommendation and grant exemption on a particular good, on a particular service. Okay, so on goods there are some goods which are exempted from GST. There are some services which are exempted from services from GST, and there are so not only with respect to goods, not only with respect to services, based on the service provider. Who is the service provider here? Who is the service provider here? Based on the service provider also, based on the type of the service provider also, exemption will be given. Based on the service recipient also, exemption will be given. Okay, so for a particular service provider, exemption may be given. For a particular service recipient, exemption may be given. Okay, exemption may be given. So these are the types of exemption. But if the exemption has to be given, a notification has to be released. A notification has to be released saying that these activities are done by so and so persons, or these activities are done by any person. This will be given as exemption, provided these conditions are satisfied, or it is a general exemption. That means a conditional exemption may be there or an absolute exemption may be there. If these conditions are satisfied, then only exemption will be given. If these conditions are satisfied, exemption will be given karke, there may be an exemption, or absolute exemption that there is no condition. There is no condition. Unconditional exemption may be there. So these are the types of exemption. These are the types of exemptions. So there shall be a notification. So likewise we have notification 12/2017. Exemption notification, mega exemption notification. That means many services, almost all the services which are given as exemption has been enlisted here. So later on there are some amendments to the list. That means there are some inclusions and deletions to the list. Okay, firstly the most important list for exemption is notification 12/2017. In this notification there are certain list of services which are exempted for GST, exempted from GST. So those list only we are going to study now. Those list only we are going to study now. So exemptions means we have exemptions with respect to goods, with exemption with respect to services, exemption to some service providers, exemptions to some service recipients. Okay, and at the same time exemptions may be general exemption, exemption may be special exemption. So upon satisfying some conditions, okay, exemption may be there. Without any condition, exemption may be there. Okay, so likewise it will be. Right, we will start with the introduction of this chapter. Okay, we'll see here. Okay, some goods and services gets a free pass from GST. Introduction, wherever goods or services are supplied, GST is usually charged, but not everything is taxed. Some things are exempt. Okay, meaning you don't have to pay tax on them. Just because an item is sold doesn't always mean it is taxable. So in this chapter you will learn what kind of goods or services exempted from GST, who can get exemptions, whether supplier, recipient, or both will get exemptions, and how the government decides what to exempt, and what is an exempt supply. So exempt supply means, we have a definition as per section 2. We have already told this definition. Exempt supply means which attracts nil rate of tax, one thing, and which is exempted by notification, and includes non-taxable supply. What is a non-taxable supply? Which are not leviable to GST. What are those? Alcoholic liquor for human consumption and 5 products: petrol, petroleum, crude, diesel, aviation, turbine fuel, natural gas. So totally 6 those are. So alcoholic liquor for human consumption, petrol, petroleum crude, diesel, aviation turbine fuel, natural gas. So these are the 6 which are non-taxable supply. Remaining are exempt. Okay, exempt supply includes non-taxable supply. Okay, nil rate of GST means 0. That means levy is there on it. Levy is there on it, but presently 0 rate is there. Rate of GST is 0%. Later point of time it may be extended to 3%, 5%, whatever. Okay, an exempt supply means GST is not charged on the supply and supplier cannot claim input tax credit. See here, supplier cannot claim input tax credit on the purchase used to make that supply. See, they are telling that. So actually this is an ITC point, input tax credit point, input tax separate chapter is there, no? So there we have to discuss. See, a supplier is there, he is making output or outward supply. Outward supply. On outward supply, GST is 0. On outward supply, GST is 0. So for making this outward supply, he might have made inward supply, correct? Inward supply. If he is a manufacturer, inward supply will be raw materials. If he is a trader, inward supply will be the same goods. See, inward supplies, right? So outward supply is having GST 0. That means exempted. That means whenever he is purchasing inward supply, so there may be a tax on this. Let's say there is a tax on it, on inward supplies, on raw materials, there is a GST. He has paid that GST. But these raw materials are used for making the exempt supply. Correct? Inward supply is there on which he has paid GST. Inward supply is there on which he has paid GST. That inward supply is used for making the outward supply which is exempted from GST. So that means inward rate is 5%, outward rate is 0%. Outward rate is 0%, inward rate is 12%, outward rate is 0%. Okay, he is using the goods which he has purchased. Okay, by paying GST is used for what? For making outward supply which is exempt from GST. So in such cases, this 12% input tax which he has paid, GST which he has paid, will not be given as input tax credit. Will not be given as input. Whenever he is using such goods for taxable supply, then only he will get input tax credit. So that's why in the first class I told you, sometimes input tax is not equal to input tax credit. Sometimes input tax is not equal to input tax credit. Generally input tax means, input tax credit means whatever you are paid to your supplier will be the input tax, will be given as input tax credit. But sometimes there are exceptions to it. Okay, what is that? Input tax is straight away not equal to input tax credit. Okay, na? So there will be some block. Some input tax are not eligible as input tax credits. Okay, so that's what. Next, there are 3 types of exempt supplies which attracts nil rated supplies. GST rate is equals to 0%. Wholly exempt supplies through a government notification, completely exempted, and non-taxable supplies not covered under GST law at all. Non-taxable supply which are not leviable to GST. Next, non-taxable supply means alcoholic liquor for human consumption. Next, petrol, petroleum products and all. Petrol, diesel, crude oil, natural gas, aviation fuel. So you won't see GST on this because they are not under the purview of GST. Who can exempt taxes? Government has the power to exempt taxes on goods or services. As per section 11, CGST Act is giving power. As per 6 of IGST Act is giving power. States have similar powers through SGST Act. So common exempt goods are milk, curd, lassi, eggs, unpacked rice, wheat, pulses, fresh fruits and vegetables. Goods which are exempted. Services which are exempted are healthcare services, education services, charitable activities, etc. Okay, some other services also exempted under GST. So these are the examples here. Next, let's see GST exemptions are classified. How the GST exemptions are classified? Exemptions for specific activities or transactions. Okay, so that means a specific activity or specific supply of goods or supply of services will be exempted. Okay, so the nature of the service matters here. Not who is supplying, not who is receiving. That means supplier may be any person, recipient may be any person. If he is doing such activity, that will be given as exemption. Let's say selling a going concern. Selling a going concern. A business is there, it is sold as it is. All the liability is transferred, all the assets are transferred. Complete the business has transferred as a going concern. Okay, so that will be given as exemption. Okay, next, storage of rice. or warehousing of rice or handling of rice, okay, that will be given as exemption. Okay, so if anybody is doing such activity, that is an exemption. It is not necessarily a particular person is doing such activity that will be given as exemption. So if any person who is doing such activity will be given as exemption. Next, exemption for specific suppliers. Specific suppliers means, see, only certain suppliers gets the benefit who are into that business. Okay, so government departments providing services and charging less than 5,000 rupees. Government departments providing services charging less than 5,000 rupees. Charitable trusts registered under Income Tax Act providing charitable services. Okay, to these suppliers, see, the exemption is not on the activity, the exemption is to the supplier. To the government it is exempted, to the charitable institutions it is exempted. What is the activity, that is a different matter. To these institutions, to the governments, it is given as exemption. See, charitable activities, charitable trusts are doing some activity, that will be given as exemption. If the same activity is done by some other person, that will be taxable again. Okay, so it is a specific exemption given to specified suppliers only. Okay, likewise exemptions for specified recipient. So government getting insurance paid fully by the government. Okay na? So government is getting insurance services. Government is getting insurance services from the insurance companies. Oh, that is no GST, exempted. Government receiving training services with 75% plus cost paid by them, exempt. Training services means government want skill development. Okay, so that's why government outsourced some persons, outsourced the work to some persons. So government is receiving skill development services from a outsourcing company. Okay, who is into skill development. So training services for which government is giving 75% of the cost to them. So that is also given as exemption. So exemption for both specific suppliers and specific recipients. Okay, works only when a particular supplier provides a service to a particular recipient. Okay, so ESI corporation gives services to people under ESI Act. Okay, so NPS trust providing admin services to its own members. A particular service provider is giving services to particular service recipient, then only it will be given as exemption. Okay, right. So these are the types of exemptions, and so understanding exemption helps the businesses avoiding unnecessary tax payment. So if it is exempted, he need not pay tax, no. So sometimes there may be a confusion whether it is exempted or whether it is taxable. So in that cases, if you are understanding exemptions properly, that will save your taxes. Know when not to collect GST from the customer. If it is exempted from GST, you should not collect GST from your customer. If you are collecting like that, so it will be a disadvantage for you in two ways. Like you are collecting unnecessary and you are paying unnecessarily. At the same time, it will be a message will be sent to the your customer that so you are unnecessarily collecting taxes. He may be on the impression that you are collecting the taxes for your own benefit, not for paying taxes. Okay, likewise, and stay compliant and avoid penalties. So just like some roads are toll free and you can travel without paying, some suppliers are tax free and you don't have to pay GST. Okay, but the rules must be understood clearly. Okay, so this is all about exemptions which we have to start it. So exemptions by notification 12/2019 mega exemptions that we have to study. So there are exemptions with respect to goods, there are exemptions in case of services as well. So we have to study the list of exemptions. Okay, right. After a break we will start.